The major M&A trends that we saw for 2015 were that deal activity was quite robust. From a deal volume perspective, we saw that year over year it was steady, but 2014 was a really good deal year, so that's a good sign. We saw deal valuations increase quite significantly, predominantly in the United States, but leaking over into Canada. And what happens there is that you see a lot of U.S. buyers coming to Canada looking for deal flow, and of course Vancouver and Canada generally, we saw a lot of activity in the deal space, notwithstanding the energy issues. The trends we saw in 2015 positively affected our clients. We had clients who hadn't been considering selling their business up until they had received an unsolicited offer from a potential buyer, both from the United States and locally here in Canada. We had clients who had been thinking about selling their business for the last few years, but decided that 2015 was such a good year that now was the right time, and they came to us seeking guidance in terms of what to do next. And we had clients who had been thinking about acquiring a company but weren't sure how to do it, so they called us and we sat down and talked to them about the process and what it takes to acquire a company. When evaluating whether to buy a business or whether to sell a business, fundamentally it's a very simple question to ask yourself is, when you're a buyer of a business, you're trying to get as much value out of the company as possible for as little consideration, i.e. price. When you're a seller of a business, you're trying to convey your company and get as much value as possible, again, price, and sometimes terms and structure of a transaction. When our clients approach us to seek advice when they're thinking of buying a business or when they're thinking of selling their own business, we often start with walking them through what the process looks like and the due diligence that's required to get started with the process. When buying a business, we work through what the current business looks like, what the planning is like for the next 1, 3, 5, and even beyond in terms of years. And then we work through what the appropriate pricing ranges are, what the structure would look like, and what the transaction terms could potentially look like to help evaluate whether acquiring a business makes sense today or tomorrow. When our clients seek to sell their business, first let's start with the unsolicited offer. They often aren't prepared to have those discussions. They're often flattered that another buyer or another person is interested in acquiring their business, but the seller hasn't thought through what kind of pricing makes sense to them, what kind of terms make sense to them, and frankly what they're going to do post-transaction. So we walk them through that process. We also help them put the safeguards in place to help them through the process, such as confidentiality agreements and whatever else is required in their particular situation. When a client who's a seller comes to us and wants to discuss selling their business and they've put some thought into it, then we just walk through the process, things to expect. Again, it's probably a further along conversation in terms of what the pricing and what the structure looks like of the transaction, and then walk them through what the deal looks like or what their deal looks like post-transaction.